Well, we kind of we burned a lot of time on that one, but I wanted to get back to like who are you and how'd you get to like where you're at in your career? That's usually how we start, and I didn't realize that was going to take 20 minutes. But that was fun. That was a fun segment.
You said there wasn't really necessarily a roadmap, right? We're going to talk about some things and see where
There's not a roadmap, and that's what I like about what we're doing is like we just really start the better conversations on this podcast just come out of the little sidebar conversations. So
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
But yeah, so with that, Jared, tell us a little bit about yourself. So what's your high level career story look like, and how did you get to be in some senior project analysis and support?
Well, so taking it back, like I grew up on a farm, right? And when you grow up on a farm, you build everything, you fix everything, right? So I had kind of a passion for construction there, and I started out as a physics major. And I worked for the NASA Missouri Space Grant Consortium, and we took pictures of stars that nobody's ever going to see, right? And it just didn't seem like it wasn't something I could touch. And so I wanted to do something that I could touch. So I switched majors, and I graduated with a degree in architectural mechanical design, moved to St. Louis, took a job with Albarisi, who is a global general contractor. Constructor, yeah, and their structural steel division, and so we did a lot of schools, we did stadiums, power plants, hospitals, so on and so forth. That's kind of our bread and butter. Worked there for a few years, and I don't like to necessarily be pigeonholed in one area. That's one thing about me. I like to see lots of different things. And so I felt like I was kind of getting pigeonholed in structural steel. And I can tell you after you've designed one or two beams, they all start looking the same, right? And so there was an opportunity in this community here in St. Louis called University City. It was a planned community, so every single building is pretty different. There's Art Deco buildings and all these different things, to be a building inspector. And I thought long and hard about this, but I realized that by being a building inspector, I'd be on pretty much every construction job there. And also, I would get an opportunity to learn all the different trades, right? Because you'd be a combination inspector. And so I started doing that and ended up working there. And then another residential suburb here in St. Louis that was more track home construction and more of your Walgreens, your McDonald's, your franchises. Whereas the places that I did work were kind of one-offs. You had a lot of mom and pop, custom. We got an architect and an engineer. This is just for this site. And then when I went out to O'Fallon, it's like, hey, this is the same Walgreens that we've built all across the United States. Not much difference. And so I enjoyed that. Then I went to the county here and, managed emergency management and construction there. Built some really cool buildings while I was there. Emergency operations center. It was pretty neat. And then this opportunity came up at Nestle Purina. And so I went to become a project manager at Nestle Purina and work industrial. And so really enjoyed that. And then an opportunity came up to do project support and analysis. And instead of just having one project, to get to support all the projects and then analyze, what we're doing well, what we can improve on, how we dashboard and report our KPIs out. It felt like I was making more of a difference to the business being in this role than just managing a single project. And I can really appreciate the work that they do, because a lot of what I've done in the past has been construction management or design or managed engineering. I even managed IT for a while. But this is really like from the beginning to the end, right? Like site selection all the way to turning it over to operations is the way they manage projects, and to be able to see it all the way through design and see it through construction and commissioning and all of that is it's a big change.
What's kind of been that's quite a background. You've done literally, it sounds like a little bit of everything. To some degree, aside from maybe swinging a hammer on a job site, but kind of everything else, you kind of been there. But what's kind of been the biggest struggle you've had, maybe kind of when you went from like, even like say a residential inspector, right? Because you're doing some of that to, a county and municipality to now like an industrial kind of. What's been the biggest hurdle you've had at each one of those kind of transitions?
Well, I think like as Kyle was talking about when we were talking about electrical contractors, it's a whole different beast when you go back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And growing up in a farming community, the way contractors started out is they had a family member that did this, or they had a neighbor that did it and they needed a job and they went and they bought a tool belt and they showed up on Monday and they just started working, right? And they followed them around and they learned what this person knew. And that's kind of the way that I started out as a building inspector, unfortunately, is I didn't have a very good mentor that had lots of experience. So you had to do a lot of reading and then you followed people around. And what I realized after doing it 4 or 5 years was I didn't know what I was doing, right? And so when you realize that you didn't know what you were doing in the past as well as you wanted to, you spend a lot more time figuring out what it is that you need to do to be successful in your current role. And as I've moved from career to career, going from like more of a residential side all the way up to industrial, I realized that those people are the same type of people, right? Like you have a different level of designer at an industrial level than you did at a residential level, right? Mm-hmm. And people that have differing opinions, there's a lot more engineering and thought process that goes into the industrial aspect of it than the commercial aspect of it. So those are kind of some differences that I've seen along the way, along with the contractors, the type of contractors that we're bringing in. We're not bringing in people to work on projects that, went and bought a tool belt and showed up on Monday morning, right? We're bringing in people that have gone to trade school, that have years of experience as a owner. I'm only going to want to hire people that have that competency because I can't afford to do rework.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was gonna say even on commercial, like you're talking about doing like the same McDonald's they've done everywhere. Like there's not any, it's just copy paste over and over and over, mm-hmm. And so there's no. I wouldn't say there's no challenge. There's always some sort of challenge, I'm sure, but like it's doing that versus doing a county landmark, right? They're building a new courthouse or something, right? Yes. It's going to last generations. Even like those are both commercial projects, but those are like wildly different.
Well, and like to your point, for example, we have a gas station chain here in the Midwest. I don't know if you guys have it. Quick Trip, you might have it in Chicago.
QT.
Yep, QT. And so Quick Trip was going through and they were updating a lot of their different facilities. And they had, I believe it was a 90-day turnaround from when they would demolish their current structure to where they needed the other one up. And they, came in and we were talking about the cost every day on revenue that they lose by not having that gas station up and running. So they're ripping the whole thing down and digging up their existing tanks and so forth. And they have to put their stormwater underground and everything else. And then you run into something like the sewer main goes under your building and has to be relocated. Throws the whole thing off for 4 months. So even though it's a cookie cutter, exactly what's going in there, you're going to run into those things that you just didn't expect that are going to completely throw you off.
And it's always the silly things where like no one thought to look, like right if somebody like would have like probably looked at the utility map or like done some sort of ground penetrating radar thing, they're like, oh hey, there's something running down here. But I think actually a lesson right there, because like we kind of get stuck in those cookie cutter things and like we just kind of get lazy with things and don't think about it. And it seems like always the things that bite us in the ass are like those things that like we should have probably looked at first, but like we just got lazy with it.
Well, you get a good pre-construction person on your team that looks at those things. That's extremely valuable. We've had buildings before that have had stormwater piping from the interstate under them and open a sinkhole up in the middle of a liquor store and collapse the floor out of it. Somebody bought that building, and how did they not know that there was like a 4-foot stormwater pipe that went under the building? Why was the building built there in the first place? But those are the types of things that you end up seeing.
Well, and kind of to your point, Matt, about being lazy or complacency, right? I mean, we're kind of talking about
That's the word I was
complacency,
looking for.
and really, I mean, because I saw it too in engineering, is that even in the industrial world a little bit, you do a project and you do the design for it, but for the most part, you're going to go to the next project and do kind of the same things. I mean, usually, I mean. But there is always those challenges. You come into an existing plant or a factory, and now it is very customized. There's very different challenges you have to get through with. And so, if you are somebody that's just used to doing the same things over and over again, and not really diving into it, and not really putting your mind to wrap around all those details, it can be a big problem for the project when it comes to execution time, because you might miss that 4-inch sewer or that 4-foot sewer line. I mean, there can be stuff that comes up you just didn't even think about because, well, this wasn't an issue on the last one or the last one before that, so we didn't even think about it. You probably should.
We could do a whole podcast on the using standard details on renovation projects and the downfall.
Oh yeah,
it never works ever, but we try to.
Yeah.
So Jared, tell us a little bit about project analysis. And I mean, I'm not super familiar with it, to be honest with you. I haven't been involved with it a whole lot from at least a formalized manner. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe what you and your group do? Maybe some more detail around it, and maybe some of the stuff that's done well and done right versus people that don't know how to do it.
Well, I think that it's not just my current job, but one of the things that led me up to this was the fact I've done this in different places. In at least last 3 or 4 places that I've worked, you do the same sort of thing. So, being able to take a look at schedules and costs and have a good understanding of we want to standardize so many different things. Here we're talking about standardization and utilizing a template and the convenience of utilizing that instead of actually doing the work. It's okay, well, we'll just use these standard details. And you throw those onto something, but there's something that you lose by not starting from scratch, right? When you take a look at that schedule, and we want to just throw that schedule on there because it's done and we can move on to the next thing. But then you lose this touch with the schedule, right? If you would have built it yourself, you'd know every intricacy to that schedule. And instead, you just import that schedule in and you start running with it and making changes as you go. And then you realize that things are off. And so we have looked at those in the past, how do you standardize milestones on schedules so that you can report them the same across all your projects? I've managed portfolios before that have had 3,500 projects going on, working for the county. And you need to have those same standard milestones so that you can report things up, right? Yeah. And then if you can do that, then you can actually throw them into a model. Right. So you're looking at a cost estimate on R3 construction, your single family homes, and you go through and you take a look at what the cost of construction is per square foot. If you pull that data in and it's the same across, I can model it. Right. And if I know that, a certain percentage of that cost goes to foundations, and I know that concrete's going up a certain percentage, I can use that data that I had in there and actually model and figure out what my cost of construction is going to go up across a huge portfolio. And I can spread it out across a huge portfolio. Whereas, I can remember in the early 2000s when I worked at Albarisi, we had this huge steel surcharge that we had to put on there because China was buying all of our scrap metal. And we didn't know what the cost of metal was going to be when we actually purchased it, right? So we bid it at one thing, and then we come back and it'd be 3 times more expensive. So, we had to take some steps when we would bid that to make sure that we were able to pay for the steel. And if you can spread that amongst a lot of different projects, then there's a huge opportunity, right? And when you can pull that data in and analyze it, you can start making more informed decisions and actually make an impact on your business.
Yeah, when you can really, I'm trying to say, the economies of scale too, right there. When you can when you were at Albarisi, were y'all hedging with any sort of steel futures or anything like that to try to lock in a price or anything? Or
I don't know if I call it hedging, but I went through the steel yard and found some substitutes a few times so I could keep my costs.
This will work. It's the same, similar way.
Just get the engineer to sign off on it. It'll be fine. We can run this today.
It's an upgrade. This thing's bigger than you wanted. So
absolutely.
Very cool.